time now for part 2 of the Gran Turismo World Championship. And as you can see here, I am of course on the main menu screen for simulation mode. And basically, the only option we really have is to return to the GT World Championship, or whichever championship it is you're doing, at the time of when you've more or less saved your progress. So the only thing we can really do is head back to the professional events, and if it asks you if you want to continue whatever championship it is you're doing, you just press OK, and then you can get back to the championship. I can definitely say that suspending your racing activities for a certain amount of time and then being able to simply return to your championship progress afterwards, I think that's a very neat little touch. So, as we are now into the second half of the GT World Championship, I have a 15-point lead over the R92 CP. The Toyota is third, well, tied for third with the other R89C, and well, the CLK GTR and the Gile Vertigo, well, they're pretty much just here for funsies, basically. But anyway, before we get on with part 2 of this, I need to make sure that I have the super slicks on. Yes, I do. That's all good. And now, what we have to do is begin part 2 of the championship here on the streets of Manhattan. So without further ado, let's now head down the front stretch of Times Square. And where if we win this, we will get 68 points. Hopefully, since the road surface will be smooth enough here on the streets of New York, I think we should be okay. Because they're not exactly bumpy like the ones in Hong Kong. And where basically, because of that bumpy road surface, well, the rear tyres basically failed on me right at the end. But this time around, however, I am pretty convinced in saying we shouldn't have quite as many issues as what we had in Hong Kong, because, well, here in Manhattan, the roads are typically smooth, so I think we should be okay. A few bumps here or there, but not really anything that's concerning to the point of where the track surface will simply just chew up and then spit out the tyres, like it did in Hong Kong, so I think we should be okay with this. I don't think we have to pit, but sometimes it's best to not leave everything you do to chance. And it looks as though the tyres are holding up pretty well, so I would estimate we should be okay with this. But as to how I do in the last race, well, that remains to be seen. However, I do have the advantage of tyre durability, because I know that my longevity in being able to use the super slicks is more beneficial to me in the long term, as I'm now catching up to the Nissan R92 and stepping on the brakes right before the right-hander. I was just getting a sniff at the draft there, as I now work my way up the inside. And now, the only thing that's between me and the lead is the Toyota. So noticing bits of tyre wear here and there, but hopefully it's not anything concerning. I am convinced in saying that the tyres will be able to last longer here in Manhattan than they did at Hong Kong Harbour, which is basically where we were racing last time. Well, the time before, in fact, because, well, the previous race was at Seoul Central. But I think we should be okay from here. So heading back down Broadway through Times Square and just hitting 211 as I go through these two left-handers, and it looks as though tyre durability is going to be a factor yet again. Not really going too hard on the upshifts, because I know I'm going to pass the Toyota eventually, as he now goes over the curb, and it looks as though this will more or less be the best time for me to strike, as I think we're now heading up to Broadway, I think this is. And gap is now just 1 second to the Toyota ahead of me, as we head through Columbus Circle now for the third time. Just biding my time at the moment and waiting to see how long it is before he pits. Had to shift down to second there, or else my corner exit would have been garbage. Gap is still a second, but I'm right there in the slipstream, as I now hit just over 220 down the front stretch. And now we head back up Broadway. He was definitely throwing a block on me. I did try to see if I could sell him a dummy and pass him from the outside, but he wasn't having it. I did at least have to try and go for a sniff of it, but unfortunately he shut the door on me before any impact could be made. And right now, I'm just trying to bide my time here. So, doing okay at the moment, as the gap is now half a second to the Toyota. We head through Columbus Circle another time. I'm biding my time because the Toyota does have the grippier tyres, which means he'll have stronger cornering speed. But that doesn't mean he'll be quite as effective in the straight lines. So 3/10 is now the gap. I slingshot past him on the outside, and I think that's now handed me the lead for the first time. He gives me a nudge. He must be trying to pass me, but he's not going to get there, because I had long since cinched the position on outright pace anyway. So heading through the right-hander once again, and now it looks as though from here I can pretty much afford to be conservative, because I have now taken over the lead, and basically I'm just not going to look back. And upshifting into third gear, so I limit the wheel spin. There is also something else called the gear trick that does manage to limit the tyre degradation, but personally I'm not really someone who chooses to use the gear trick, because, well, I'm not really that technical to the point of where I can get it to work. Even though I do know certain transmission settings are more of a benefactor than others. So 2 seconds is now the gap. As we now head through these two left-handers, and I'm now slowly pulling away from the Toyota behind me, and using third gear because, well, I figure it's easier that way. Best time I've set so far is a 1:23.7, and I think we should be okay from here on out. Because I know the AI will inevitably have to pit at some point, but I'm convinced in saying that since New York has a smoother road surface, as I said before, compared to what Hong Kong had, the track surface isn't quite as abrasive as it was in Hong Kong, and that was probably the main reason why the rear tyres basically failed when they did. Because I simply went a bit too long on that set of boots to realistically get to the end without a pit stop. And I have established, of course, that unless you use a car that is conservative on its tyres in Hong Kong, then you basically have got to pit. It's practically an essential necessity that you have to pit in Hong Kong if you want to win. That's one lesson I definitely learned the hard way, especially because, well, I just had basically no tread left on the rear tyres by the time they failed. Also, if you're asking me about which lap you should pit, well, I would say the lap to pit is either 15 or 16. Basically, at the end of either of those laps, and then I think if you're able to realistically make a mark by pitting in Hong Kong, then you should have a good shot at winning. But you do have to make sure that you're using either a Group C car or, quite simply, an LMP car. In other words, a prototype. In other words, a prototype that was made with speed from, I would say, about 1999 up to probably 2004, I think. Since I know that's when the other class of prototypes to win this championship can be used. But you do have to do a lot of money grinding in order to get one of those cars, because, well, to put it simply, those cars are expensive. Or, if you're wanting to do this the way I did it, then, well, I highly recommend you pretty much do the driving missions and then get the Nissan R89C, which is a quite simple but very effective way of being able to realistically get pretty much all your affairs in terms of winning in order. So we're now 8 laps in. The tyres are holding up pretty well, and I would say that's mostly because, well, as I said before, a smoother track surface, as well as also making sure you know what gears to be in through these corners. Like, for example, 3rd gear, which is what I'm basically taking a lot of these corners in. It's fair to say that being conservative, it does help you to save the tread on your tyres. And that's pretty much what I am improving here. I'm steadily pulling away from the competition behind me, which means this is probably going to be another easy win, the way I see things. as I'm now heading back up Times Square once again. And heading... I think the other straight is Broadway if I'm not mistaken. But either way, I now have a huge lead over the Toyota at this stage of the race. One benefactor you do get from the AI is knowing that they pretty much have to pit every 7 or 8 laps or so on their set of boots. Whereas if you're able to play the conservative game, then for most of these races, you can pretty much go the distance. And that's ironically what helped me to win at the Motegi Oval as well, because the AI constantly had to pit for fresh set of tyres, meanwhile I basically had to make no pit stops at all. And I think it's fair to say that definitely helped me in the long term, in terms of being able to just straight up win. That race at Motegi as easily as I did. It definitely helped me, because I had to make 0 stops, compared to the AI who probably had to make either, I think it was 3 stops the AI made at the Motegi Oval. I'm pretty sure that was what, no doubt, became the top benefactor for me to win that race the way I did. And the tyres, I think I can get them to the end. I am of course being conservative on this set of boots because with the help of pit stop cycles, I am now with a huge lead. And I think it's fair to say that I'm clearly not looking back on that. I'm going to assume that building there must be a mock-up of the Empire State Building. I could be wrong, but I think it's a mock-up of the Empire State Building, from what I know. That could be what it is. It's either that or it's the Chrysler Building. And yes, I do know the Empire State Building and the Chrysler Building are 2 different buildings. The only thing I really know about the 2 of them in terms of similarities is they're both skyscrapers. So, 11 laps in to race 6. I'm pretty much just storming away from the competition now. They pretty much have no chance of catching me, because of my conservative strategy to stay on the super slicks. And for most of these races, it's obvious to say that my strategy has worked. This, by the way, is pretty much how you can blitz the AI in terms of their outright speed. As in, you can just straight up override them by simply playing the conservative game and just doing whatever it is you can. To make sure that the results you get are palpable ones. As I'm now coming up to overlap the Chile. Looks as though he's going to go a lap down again by the time I catch up to him. He now goes into the wall, so I'm going to assume he must be on worn tyres. And looks as though at this point onwards, I've really got nothing to lose. So 37 seconds is now the gap, and I show no signs of slowing down. Because of my correct choice of rubber. And the Gile is almost nowhere to be seen. Wonder if it's possible for me to overlap the CLK GTR as well whilst I'm at it. It would be nice if I could do that. Also, I've now driven nearly 200 miles in this thing. I'm convinced in saying by the time I get to the end of this next lap I will have passed 200 miles driven in this car. As I now hit 199, and that puts me just one away from 200. One which I think I'll hit in just a matter of feet. Okay. Now I have hit the 200 mark. 200 miles driven, baby! In the Nissan R89C. And it came right here on the streets of Times Square and Broadway. I'm pretty sure the main straightaway is Times Square and the other straightaway is Broadway. I think I get the idea now. Because I know it crosses over between both Times Square and Broadway. So I'm convinced in saying the other straightaway, which is basically perpendicular to the main straightaway. I'm pretty sure the perpendicular straightaway to the Times Square straight, that has to be the Broadway straight, is what me thinks. Because I'm pretty sure that is the Manhattan Theatre I see there. Somewhere among those buildings. Wouldn't be surprised if some of those are apartment buildings as well. But anyway, closing in on the CLK GTR, I really want to try and see if I can overlap him, as the Toyota pits in again, so that's now going to give the Nissan another runner-up finish. The R92 is what I'm referring to, by the way. Can I overlap the Benz? It would be really nice if I could. It's going to be close, but I don't think I'm going to be close enough. But I'm certainly going to try. Come on, come on. I just overlapped him. I just pipped him at the line. And he basically finished at the same time as me. But anyway, there we go. Race 6 is finito. And I have once again established myself as the clear-cut winner with my tyre longevity strategy. Partly helped out, of course, by the smooth road surfaces here in Manhattan. And the R89C, once again, takes over third from the Toyota. I reckon that's going to be a real ding-dong battle over which one of the two is going to wind up finishing third. It could be a Nissan sweep, potentially, which I would not be against, because, ironically, I'm also driving a Nissan. But anyway, those are your points after 6 rounds of the GT World Championship. And now let's get on with race 7. As we are now at Opera Paris Reverse. Now this one is going to be interesting because we're running 18 laps again, but I am convinced in saying that by running in third gear for most of these corners, I'm convinced in saying we should be able to get to the end. Or if not, then we'll at least win 8 out of 10 races for sure, with the super slicks. So 68 points again, as this time we are at Opera Paris Reverse for round 7. Hopefully the cobblestones will not give me too many issues. Or so I would hope. But as ever, we'll wait and see. First thing I have to do is make sure I pass the AI, since that's partly why I'm here in the first place. I've also established there are a lot of bumps here at Opera Paris, so you do have to be mindful of those, per se. And that's kind of what I'm trying to do here, whilst also making sure that I don't lose too much speed in the process. Damn it. And as I would have expected, the Toyota takes an early lead, but I know he's going to chew up his tyres, so I don't think that's going to be too much of a problem here. But then again, we are doing 18 laps this time, so that means this race will be longer. And because we're on a bumpy track surface, which in some cases is also an abrasive track surface, we've got to make sure that we're at least able to conserve the tyres long enough to get to, I would say, about the 14 lap mark. We don't need to pit for fuel because, well, fuel is not going to be an issue here, since we're only doing 18 laps or so. And with that being said, and out of the way, and that's a wall. I knew one of the bumps was just gonna send me careening into the wall. It was almost unavoidable to the point of where I was just asking myself, why did I not just step on the brakes? If there's one thing that's annoying about Opera Paris, it's basically just the amount of bumps that you have to make sure you don't get wrong. And that can happen a lot around here, as in you've just got to be very mindful that these bumps will quite literally shred your tyres if you're not able to be conservative. And I have a feeling I'm not the only one who's had trouble here in the past because of a bumpy track surface. Which is what I come to expect, but again, I have to at least show I'm being mindful of these things. I had a feeling the AI might have an advantage here, but one thing that cannot be denied about me is, and not gonna fall for the same mistake this time, and a bit early there on the brakes, I'll admit, but still, I was convinced in saying it was not going to be possible for me to get through the corner without stepping on the brakes early, because this is definitely a bumpy track surface, there's no question about that. It almost feels about as bumpy as the Acropolis rally in some cases. So you've got to be very mindful of not only the car you're driving, but also the tyres you're using. And you've got to slowly but surely get your car adjusted to the track surface. However, I think it's only going to be a matter of time before the Toyota pits. He's not going to stay in the lead for too much longer, I don't think. And some of these are definitely second gear corners, because, well, if you don't, then the car will bog down and you'll pretty much lose a lot of your momentum. As I shift That wasn't quite as bad as the hit I took before, but yeah, something tells me the AI might have me pinned here. Because I just don't have the grip to realistically keep up with the leaders at the moment, as much as I'm desperately trying to find it. I think it's fair to say these prototypes do not like getting on bumpy track surfaces, and that's probably what's being my main hindrance at the moment. It's also why, at this time, I am currently 9 seconds back. It's probably also because I hit the wall again, but either way, I just cannot get this car dialed into the track surface at the moment. And that's what's causing me to drop far back at the moment. So I probably should have put on the hard tyres for this. Although I still would have had to pit, the truth is, I think it would have been nowhere near as much of a problem as it currently is at this time. Especially because of just how many awkwardly placed bumps there are here. Also, really doesn't help to say the Toyota is now just pulling further away from me. So it's fair to say that on the super slicks, this car does not like to be pushed around, which is basically what these bumps are doing to me right now. And why I am just struggling mightily to try and get this car dialed in. It's definitely becoming quite a struggle at this time. It also doesn't help to say the Toyota is pulling away from me. So I think the gear trick might have been useful here. But I guess it depends on knowing how many stops he makes. There are just so many fucking bumps here. It's almost unbelievable because of just how much you're basically just getting thrown around by the track surface if you're not on it all the way. And again, it is becoming a problem to me because I can barely keep my car dialed into the racing surface, let alone off the walls. And you know, I get it. I'm probably not the only one who suffers from this sort of issue, but yeah, I'm convinced in saying I might need to change tyres at some point before this race is done. Because I am almost getting nowhere with this in terms of catching up to the leaders. So yeah, to put it simply, I think a turbo kit might be useful for this one. Even though it is going to cause the tyres to pretty much be chewed up and spat out afterwards. Yeah, I just cannot get my car dialed into the track surface even if I wanted to. That's just how absurdly criminal I think it is to say that this track just does not like my super slicks. And the bumps are making it especially hard for me to just stay in one spot at a time. To actually keep the car itself dialed in long enough to actually make a call for the lead. I mean, this track surface is definitely fucking with me. And what's even more akin to that is knowing that the two leaders are practically pulling away. So it's obvious to say this track does not like my super slicks. Because I'm just I'm basically just being bounced around all over the place. And I think if I didn't have traction control on, there's almost no way I would have been able to keep this car where I wanted it to be. I would have just been spinning the tyres out everywhere. And I think it's fair to say that until the 2 leaders pit, it's fair to say that this race for me, it's just been awful. It's just been almost putrid, to the point of where I can barely keep the car on the road. And that's what's really hurting me right now. But in saying that, I got a lucky break with the 2 leaders pitting. And now as a result, I actually take over the lead. That will give me some time, but I don't think it's going to be enough time to realistically make a shot at going for the win, unless I'm able to pit in at about the same time as the leaders. Haha, you are not sending me into the wall this time. Again, as I said before, this course definitely has some awkwardly placed bumps, and you've got to be very mindful of those. This is not anything to say... This is not me saying it's a problem with the game, because it isn't. It's just me having to make sure that I get adjusted to the track surface long enough to realistically get my challenges up front, and to make sure that I can somehow, some way, hold on to this before my form suddenly goes under. And I don't normally say this very often, but I think these bumps might actually be giving me a headache. I know that's probably just me, but the truth is, the track surface definitely feels like it's bumpy enough to the point of where I feel like a headache is actually becoming a thing at this point, because I've just been basically tossed around so much by the bumps, basically left and right almost, through some of these corners, that it's almost becoming impossible for me to ignore. And maybe that's just me, but the truth is, I definitely feel it coming on to me. And it's not even a joke. Because the bumps are just basically... Because the bumps are basically just flinging me around all over the place, that it's honestly hard to know for sure if I'm actually concentrating or if I'm just becoming disoriented. It could just be the first of those two things, but if I know I'm feeling something I don't feel very often, then, well, typically it's at least worth it to try and get the word out. As much as this race has been real tough sledding for me to actually just keep my car where it's supposed to be. Because this is not your ordinary... Because this is not your ordinary struggles. This is advanced struggles. And I say that because, well, I'm just having an atrocious time trying to keep my car dialed into the corners. So it's fair to say the bumps are definitely putting me offside in certain areas. I might actually consider pitting in this race, because I'm convinced in saying that just trying to grip on this track surface, it's becoming a bit of a bitch. And I think it's fair to say that it kind of is leaving me disoriented just a little bit. Because we're basically going around this course so fast, that it's almost making me realise, up to this point, it might actually be giving me a problem. Physically. That's not a problem with the game itself, I just want to be perfectly clear on that. It's just a problem with me. Not with the game, but with me. And it will probably need sorting out sooner rather than later. Again, it's a me problem, not a game problem. Hopefully that does get the point across. What do you know, I actually downshifted for that right-hander this time. First time I've actually done that all race. Even though I did slow down for the corner just so I could not be thrown into the wall like I was earlier on. But in spite of just all the struggles I've had in this race, I actually seem to be maintaining my lead rather nicely. Which, if you would have said to me at the start of the race this was going to be the case, then I would have simply just straight up said, no way. But now that I'm actually leading and I have more than a 10-second advantage, it's becoming obvious to me that winning this race is much more possible than it was before. And I think it's fair to say that, up to this point at least, I am going to have to pit before the end of this. That's basically a must at this stage, if I'm actually going to win this. Because I have a feeling that my tyres are probably going to get to probably the red zone again, which means my rear tyres will probably be dead. And since I already went through that experience once in Hong Kong, I'm obviously not going to be hesitant to pit this time around. Because I've been struggling to keep this car on track basically all race long. And as you might have guessed, there have been a few wrecks in between that have definitely told me that in order to avoid what might be a huge accident, I probably do need to pit. That's basically a must at this point, especially since the Toyota is slowly but surely catching up to me, so I want to make sure I maintain that lead by pitting. It seems like my best choice at this point. Is what me thinks. That was a perfect corner entry. I honestly did not think that was going to work, but I actually got the friggin' bitch to work. And maybe that was because I stepped on the right curb to give me just the entry I needed. And as you can see now, well, my tyres are very close to dead. So I will definitely not be making the same mistake I made before, where I went too long on the tyres and basically afterwards, well, the tyres were virtually shredded on the rears. And it was obvious to say that I went too long on that previous set of boots. And I almost set a new best lap time. However, I'm convinced in saying that since the AI pitted on lap 8 before, this is probably going to be my best time to pit again. Because then it means I will ultimately close the door from the AI, basically trying to get their slingshot pit stop from catching me by the end of it. And I've gone too deep. Well, yeah, I definitely need to change this set of boots. I need to change them now. There's no fucking way I'm getting to the end of this race on this set of boots. My tyres are almost... well, my rear tyres at least, they're almost shredded as they are anyway. So basically, I have to pit. I don't want to make the same mistake I made last time out in Hong Kong. I know that for sure. Because this is not a race I want to do again. And... yeah. I don't think the refueling really needs to happen. And the R92 continues, but I think I'll pit on the next lap. However, I'm going to have a much grippier set of boots now than what I had before. And whether I lose the race or not depends on the circumstances, but the truth is, I had to change tyres. And now that I'm on a grippier set, I think I'm really going to start blitzing the lap times now in this thing. Because I'm on a much fresher set of tyres. I did not think that was going to work, but it somehow did. So this is my outlap. I'm 8 seconds behind the R92 CP. I have a strong feeling that I'll probably be pitting at the end of this lap, which will hopefully give the lead back to me, but since I'm on a much grippier set of tyres now, I can actually start setting good lap times, even though it's only going to be one good lap time at best. I'm now just 6.8 seconds behind, so he's got to be pitting this lap. And he does. And that now gives me the lead by default. Alright, final lap here at Opera Paris Reverse. As I now take the lead over from the R92 CP, who now drops down to, I think, 4th position, because he pitted. But either way, I really had to be patient to make sure I could get this to work, but I'm glad to say that I definitely saved this set of medium tyres for the end of this race. And yes, I know I said yes to the refueling, but basically, fuel is nowhere near a factor here. You're pretty much going to be fine for the duration of the race. Fuel is basically no problem to you whatsoever. But either way, I am out front, and hopefully I can manage to maintain my advantage up top. I can definitely say the car feels faster now than it did before, and I'm going to set a new best lap time by 3 seconds. I was literally 3 seconds faster than my previous best time. That's just how much more grip I had compared to the Super Slicks. That feels amazing. But altogether, I'm not gonna lie, that race was pretty tricky. Although I eventually did manage to win with my superior long stint and also switching over to my much more grippier stint, that was still a pretty tough race altogether. It was not on the cards for me to basically struggle with one race as much as I did there. But either way, I switched from the super hards to the mediums, and at the end of the day, it somehow managed to work out. Not quite as dominant as I have been before, but either way, I did still win the race. And that's all I care about. It's probably going to be 9 out of 10, which means I will have to make sure I do a similar strategy when we get to Hong Kong during the cleanup. And we are now at Suzuka Circuit for Race 8 of the GT World Championship. It now looks as though the R89C is pulling away from the Toyota in their battle for third. I think because we're just running 9 laps here, we should be fine, is what May thinks. So, let's see how we go. As I have now driven for nearly 240 miles in this thing. And we are 7 races in to the GT World Championship, as I have been recording this now for less than an hour. And we'll almost certainly be past the 1 hour mark by the time we get to the end of this. But now it's back to business as usual, and I am back on my much colder super slick tyres, which means I'll have to make sure I get them up to temperature, but I'm also going to have to be conservative. As the R89C runs wide, coming off Dagna 2, and now we head into the hairpin as I give him a little bump from the inside, but then again I did have the racing line on the exit. I think that's fair and just, and as we head through Spoon Corner, it now looks as though it's going to be probably another race where I basically score another almighty win in my Nissan, as I ran wide off the exit of 130R. Anyway, 1 lap is done, and we still have another 8 laps to go here at the World's Figure of 8 circuit. And it looks as though the track surface does appear to be abrasive, but hopefully it's not going to be too much of an issue from here. I know the AI will have to pit at some point, but hopefully I won't have to, because we're only doing 9 laps around Suzuka, which is easier than doing 10 laps. And it very much looks as though I'm slowly pulling away from the AI. So the Toyota currently holds second, then it's the R92CP in third. We are getting through these corners quite handily at the moment. So I think it's fair to say that we are doing pretty well. As I'm now 3.5 seconds clear of the Toyota. So heading through Casio Triangle once again, and through Amusement Park Corner, as I like to call it, and now the gap is still 3 seconds to the Toyota. I'm also pretty convinced in saying that my headache is gone now. It probably must have just been the It probably must have just been the bumpy track surface at high speed that was probably leaving me disoriented. But I think it's fading away now. I have no idea what happened now. So I think it's fair to say whatever pains I had before, they're more or less justifiable now. It must have just been the disorientation of the track surface that was putting me off balance. But at this time, I think we're doing okay. So, we're nearly 3 laps in as we head through Spoon Corner another time. And now we head onto the back straightaway, or as I prefer to refer to it as the Spoon Straight. And now, heading through to 130R at just over 200. Probably didn't have to step on the brakes there, but I made sure to do so anyway. There are certain cars where you can go flat out through 130R in this game, but again, because I'm not really having to push hard at this stage, I'm basically just taking this race in strides, which is more or less what I need to be doing. I'd say my lap times are pretty consistent, and I think everything should be fine, but as ever, I am not prepared to count my eggs before they hatch. So we're a third of the way there now. We're not too far from the halfway point, which will probably be once we've completed, I would say, the end of lap 5, when we'll pretty much be halfway through this. And I'm now slowly pulling away from the Toyota. Still, I have got to give him credit for keeping up with me. I've not really had to deal with a lot of races where I've had to deal with the AI actually not being too far behind me. Even though at this point, the R89 is still slowly but surely churning away from the AI anyway. But still, I will admit, I think the cause is justifiable. As we head through Casio Triangle for the 4th time now, I am less than 2 minutes away from the 1 hour mark as I looked at my monitor, and I set a new best lap time, this time a 1 minute 47 flat, and 5.6 seconds is now the gap. My only question is, when will they pit? Looks as though the Super Slicks are very much doing their job here. I could have switched over to the Racing Hards if I really wanted to at Opera Paris, and I probably still would have set a new best lap time anyway, but again, I figured because of how much of the race was left, it was just a lot easier for me to pick the grippier set of rubber than it was for me to, well, the grippiest set of rubber I have, rather than switching over to just a grippier set than my Super Slicks. Which would have been fine, but at the same time it wouldn't have felt quite as rewarding when I set that 1 minute 12.5 I set on that last lap. Although I did kind of get lucky with the R92 pitting right at the end, but the truth is, I had to at least prove that I could go fast enough to set the benchmark pace. I almost spun out there at 130R, and that would have been disastrous because I would have also lost the lead. Had that spin gone all the way. And as a result of me getting sideways, well, I wound up not setting a new best lap time, which is perfectly understandable, because I was loose coming off the corner. And as I would have guessed, well, the spin probably wouldn't have mattered because, well, the two leaders had technically pitted. And now the Gile is in the pits. I think that's the Mercedes CLK GTR that took over third as a result of those pit stop cycles. I did, of course, showcase the first pit stop in this game, and believe it or not, it took me precisely 70 episodes to actually showcase a pit stop. But either way, it looks as though I am very much pulling away now from the R89C who runs in second. And a little bit wide there off 130R, that's very easy to do, knowing my experience of getting it wrong at 130R. There have been plenty of accidents there over the years, because a lot of drivers have been caught out by 130R. I actually set a new highest top speed for the race. I think I set a 207 down the straight. I was probably doing at least 207 down the stretch, and I'm going to assume that must have been because of a certain bump that I probably felt, giving me that extra turbulence. And now the Merc is also in the pits. And I run wide at Degner. Yeah, I ran wide at Degner. That was where the running wide happened. So, 6 laps in, we still have another 2.5 laps to go now as we head through 200R for the 7th time, and now heading through Spoon Corner another time. And it looks as though... Yep, I'm now basically going on an absolute tear here. And yep, I get caught out by 130R. Again, as I said before, you'd be amazed on how easy that is to do. If you get yourself all crossed up at 130R. It's usually very hard to not put yourself in the wall. I think the reason why my car might be a little faster down the straight is because I don't have as much fuel. Which essentially means that the car in terms of pace is lighter. And I'm running wide through a lot of these corners right now. I kind of want that to stop. I could pit for another set of tyres if I really wanted to, but I don't think there would really be a point in doing that, because we're already pretty much past the pit stop cycles now. And I honestly believe they don't really matter. Still, I will give the Toyota and the Nissan credit for giving us a interesting battle for second. But as for the lead, however, well, that's clearly on me. Because as you might have guessed, well, when I'm not running wide, Okay, just because I'm leading, it does not automatically mean I can just keep running wide through some of these corners and basically just giving away fuck knows how much time my mistakes are just giving away right now. Just because I'm leading, it does not mean I can automatically just shit my pants through some of these corners the way I have been doing. Anyway, final lap here at Suzuka, and hoping that this time I can manage to put together a reasonable enough lap to the point of where it's not going to be my mistakes that cost me time. Even though I am only 25 seconds clear now of the Toyota because of his fresher set of boots. And partly the reason for that as well because of my mistakes, but if I can get it right on this lap, then I think I should be able to win by at least, what, maybe 26 seconds at best. So through the hairpin now for the final time, and now heading through 200R. You can very much go flat out through here in most race cars because of the way the corner's designed. And now I'm less than 25 seconds clear of the Toyota. Through sector 2 I go, step on the brakes, running wide again, but not getting caught out by the fucking gravel trap this time. And is this going to be a new best lap time? It definitely is. In spite of me running wide at 130R, I set a 125.5 in the end of that race. I think that's now going to mean the Toyota and the R89 are tied for third again, is what me thinks. So those are your results for race 8, and yep, we most certainly do have a tie again for third. And second isn't exactly wrapped up either yet, but either way, I think first and second are more or less decided at this stage. As I have now been racing for nearly an hour and 10 minutes up to this point of the video. So, 8 races down, and I'm seriously contemplating over saving this replay, or wherever the next one is. I think I'll do the next one. And we are now at Grand Valley Reverse for 11 laps. And because Grand Valley historically is known for chewing up the tyres, I think we should be fine with the Super Slicks. Suzuka wasn't too hard on the tyres, but I'm convinced in saying Grand Valley will be harder. Because, well, I know the history of this track through my playthroughs, and if there is one thing I can say for sure about Grand Valley, it's knowing that its track surface is definitely notorious for chewing up the tyres. And I have definitely been here before. Unless the track surface has been recently resurfaced and therefore repaved. But I don't consider that to be the case. But anyway. I stay at the front of the field and running wide there, and that's a concrete wall. Tyres are still cold, but I should be able to get them warmed up soon enough. 2.3 seconds is the gap to the Toyota. So, I think we should be in good hands here. In terms of us eventually getting to the front of the field. So heading through the hairpin at 50 plus miles an hour and hitting the back of the R92, unintentionally of course, and heading through this left-hander. The Toyota sideswipes me from the outside. Again, I don't think it was intentional. He probably didn't know I was on the inside. And the R92 is trying to do a bump and run on me, but he is not going to be successful in pulling off the pass. And really trying my hardest to catch the Toyota as we head, I think that was through the second tunnel, just after the bridge, and now through the third tunnel. And got this right-hander to negotiate. And that's a wall. I kind of put myself in the wall there. That was through no fault of the Toyota. That was just a simple mistake. We literally set the exact same delta split, even though it showed me the R89, not the Toyota 88 CV. I thought that was actually pretty funny, I'm not gonna lie, because we literally set the exact same delta time. I thought that was actually pretty funny, even though you didn't hear me laugh, but still, I do think it was pretty funny, nonetheless. Anyway, 2 laps down, and I am less than a second clear of the Toyota. Please don't run wide. Okay. I keep my Nissan on the track. And now I'm in the grass. Okay, just take it slowly. Okay. The Toyota passes me again. And I was on the curb. But at least I didn't spin the car, which is one good thing. Not gonna lie, this race has been pretty crazy so far. I haven't exactly secured my lead up to this point, and in all honesty, this race has actually been pretty fun so far. And I say so far because, well, I know once the pit stops happen, that's probably going to be when I realistically take over the lead, and then basically hold on to it for good. But I'm not going to lie, racing has actually been pretty competitive here. It's definitely been more competitive than what the other races I've done have been so far. Except maybe Opera Paris, but I wasn't exactly on a smooth enough track surface to realistically say it was fun. So 1.3 seconds now to the Toyota. I'm having to close in again from behind, following the mistake I made on the previous lap. A minor mistake, I'll admit, but again, I obviously didn't want to spin the tyres too much when I came back onto the track from the grass I ran over. So through the first tunnel once again, and now heading through the tunnel over the bridge once again, and through Tunnel 2. The Toyota so far does seem to have me pinned, but I don't think it'll be too long before I catch him. Just have to make sure I stay out of the walls long enough to make sure that, well, I can keep on churning. So, 2 seconds is now the gap. Had to shift down to second gear there so the R92 would not get a shot at slingshotting me. Kind of had to clear him that way or else he would have inevitably got me on the straight. I think I've more or less cleared him now, so this is just a battle between me and the Toyota. And I now take the lead on the front straightaway once again. He was a little bit faster through that right-hander than me. We're battling for the lead as we head through the chicane. And really trying my best to see if I can open the door. We were definitely bumping and rubbing each other, but I would say that's fair because we're both fighting for the lead. And this fight is not over yet. We're definitely fighting for this one, there's no question about that. Get a bump from behind by the Toyota. I think he probably bumped me out the way, but I honestly couldn't tell for sure because he didn't straight up wreck me. Had he done that, I would have known for sure, but I am glad to say this battle is able to keep going. Which is one thing we haven't had a lot of up to this point in the game. Okay. I almost lost control of the car there, but I was able to keep it straight long enough. And now I retake the lead once again from the Toyota, so we very much seem to be nipping one another at the moment. Which I think is a good thing because, well, I actually kind of want to be in that, you know, competitive racing environment, which I have not had the pleasure of being part of up to this point. Because the racing, for the most part, it's been pretty null and void. But this time, I think this one is fun because we're actually having to battle for the lead. And I think that's more or less what's making this one feel more intriguing. Knowing that the AI actually seem to be keeping up with me this time. Or at least the second placed car seems to be keeping up with me. Still, it's been a pretty good race up to this point. And even when the AI inevitably dupe it, I'll still have the luxury of saying that, for most of this at least, I think this was a good race. In terms of the first half. Because with just the amount of battles that I had to constantly resolve and then unresolve, this race has actually been pretty fun. Although that's more or less where it ends because, well, the two leaders have now pitted. As both the Toyota and the R92 CP are in the pits for their mandatory pit stops. And my tyre longevity is going to help me win again. As I am convinced in saying, we will no doubt be on our way to hitting the 300-mile mark by the time we get to the end of this one. Still, this race has been a lot of fun, I'm not gonna lie. It actually felt pretty fun for the most part, if I'm being totally honest with myself. I actually enjoyed this. I think this was a good race. So, 7.3 seconds is now the gap. I'm really trying my hardest to keep the car on track long enough. And that's what I do, as I now head through the hairpin once again. Looks as though this is more or less where my tyre longevity is going to come into the picture, and we are now 7 laps in to the penultimate race of the championship here at Grand Valley. As I now have a 12.5 second lead, almost certain to be probably a 20-second lead by the time I get to the end of this thing. So the R92 comes out, he's probably going to lose second place, and yes he does. The Toyota will take over second place once again, with the R92 CP in P3, and the R89 now in P4. So it looks as though the top 4 positions have now been settled. But still, for the first half of that race at least, it was actually pretty fun. I'm not gonna lie, I thought it was pretty fun. Because I actually had to battle in order to get the lead. I'm also pretty sure this race probably would have been another one of those barn-burning thrillers, which I have become accustomed to from time to time in this game, with races that I either have or haven't won. At the end of the day, I still find them to be pretty fun nonetheless. So, 3 laps to go here at Grand Valley, and we are heading through that left-right kink once again, and through the first tunnel with the overhead view. I definitely feel like the old Grand Valley layout is better than the updated layout in GT7 personally, because, well, I get why they did it, because obviously they were wanting a change of scenery, and plus the track technically is called Grand Valley, even though nowadays, of course, on the world circuits of GT7 it's technically a highway on the coast of, I think, Northern California, is it? I think that might be where it's based. But either way, I still think the original Grand Valley variant is better because it just has more of that, racetrack feel, is the point I'm trying to get across. Doesn't look like I'm going to set a new best lap time. I'm going to assume the previous best lap time I set was because of the fucking slingshot I got from the Toyota before. That was probably what helped me to get the fastest lap before, but for the first half at least, I think the racing was actually pretty good. It was definitely more competitive than I thought it was going to be before the pit stop cycles inevitably ended that. But either way, I'd still say there was enough evidence to say the racing itself was, here at least, well, good. I can definitely say this will be more interesting than the Enduros that we get down to later on in the game. Because, well, the endurance events, they're going to be pretty strung out, from what I can see. But then again, pretty much all the Enduros I've done up to this point in the GT series have been, well, strung out affairs, and, well, I've had no problems with them, so I think this will more or less be the same once we get down to it. And there goes any shot I had of setting a new fastest lap. That would have been a new best lap time had I not run wide on that corner exit. I'm also pretty sure this lap would have been pretty fast as well, but unfortunately my entry into the final corner was basically poor enough for me to basically lose all my momentum. And it looks like that's going to happen again because, well, I technically ruined the entry to this lap as well. Unless the walls in the tunnels actually helped me out, but either way, I don't think they did. But if I do manage to go faster on this run, then it might be because of that. And the Vertigo was not wanting me to pass him. He was trying to race me, and he wound up paying the price for it. Plus he is a back marker, so technically he should have just let me go by, but he did not choose to do so, unfortunately. But never mind, it's fine. Still gonna win the race regardless, even though I make the same mistake again. And because I dragged my car on the walls, that's probably what got me the new best lap time. But whatever, it's fine. As I overlap the Vertigo once again right at the end. Yeah, you can probably understand why I split this up into two parts, because, well, I'm nearly an hour and a half into this segment. I think the R92 is still going to walk away with second, but it looks like the Toyota has more or less cinched third at this point. So those are your results, and now we just have one race to go. And that one race is at Circuit de la Sarthe. So another 9 grand for winning. I'm now up to 1 million plus 160k. And you know what? I'll save the replay at the last race, because it makes sense. So we are now at the final race of the GT World Championship. I pretty much have a 38-point lead, so there's no question over saying if the championship is already cinched, because, well, I basically have cinched it. But it's still all to play for in terms of who finishes third and fourth. But I think in terms of the battle for second, I would say that's out of reach. But there's still a lot of things that are all to play for here in the finale of this championship. Plus the other thing that should be mentioned is we are doing 4 laps around Le Mans, which means there is basically a guarantee to say there will almost certainly be tyre issues. So I believe we should be on the money here. As we're heading through Dunlop Corner, just hitting 200 as we go through the Dunlop chicane and now under the Dunlop tyre bridge. And so we have 4 laps to send off the GT World Championship. And personally, I wouldn't want this to be at any other venue. Except for saying, of course, that the GT All-Stars will technically end at the Nürburgring, but we'll cross that bridge when we get to it. As I'm in the slipstream and going a top speed of 236, which is what I would have expected. Almost overshooting the first chicane on the Mulsanne, and now I am just 2 seconds behind the Toyota up front. Technically the fastest car in this game, but not necessarily the most durable car in terms of tyre wear, which is pretty much where I come in to enter the party. So 1 second is now the gap to the Toyota, and I just straight up blitz him as we go on the... This is probably the 5th Mulsanne straight. I just absolutely torched him down that stretch with my outright speed. It honestly felt like I was basically a jet once the afterburners were on. Now we head through Indianapolis Corner, and now heading up to Arnage for the first time. 1¼ seconds is pretty much the gap. And the Toyota is right behind me. So it's fair to say we're still battling here. I think the other reason why he's still in it as well because he has 6 gears, meanwhile I have 5. And I cannot change this over to a 6-speed gearbox. And in all honesty, I don't really need to, because, well, again, as I said before, once the pit stop cycles come around, and they inevitably will, that's going to be where I will inevitably outdo all the AI. So 1 lap down here at Le Mans, and hopefully we can manage to keep this going as I just overshoot Dunlop. And ultimately, as a result, I pay the price for it. There's no question in saying that Toyota is fast, but at the same time, the battle is not going to last long because he does not have the durable tyres. And that's probably what's going to help me out here, in terms of just the outright pace. Because as you can see, I'm already ahead of the Toyota. But he does seem to be keeping up with me when I overshoot some of these corners. In other words, his corner entry speeds actually aren't too bad. And I reckon if he was closer than he was, he probably would be torching me on the straight as much as I did to him before. But either way, I know my way around the circuit of 24 hours enough to know where the entry points are for these corners and to know where the exit points are. It's honestly nothing new to me. To the point of where it's just, well, straight up easier for me to say that the hundreds, if not thousands of laps that I've driven around Le Mans in racing games, it's obvious to say that in most cases I am pretty much what you would refer to as a seasoned veteran. So through Arnage Corner once again, and now heading up Maison Blanche. It very much looks as though we are going to be on course to scoring 9 of 10 wins in this championship. Our only asterisk being Hong Kong, when I ultimately realised I did have to pit in order to win. But I will make sure to sort that problem out once we get back to it. Is the Toyota going to pit this time? Not this time. But either way, it's okay, because I have a 1.7 second lead over him as we now head through Dunlop Corner another time. It's a very long lap here at Le Mans if you have been here time and again like I have. You probably will know your way around this joint pretty well. If you've been here enough times. 2.2 seconds is now the gap to the Toyota, so it's absolutely a guarantee that he probably will be pitting either at the end of this lap or the end of the next lap, or if he just decides to stay out, then that's also fine, but he'll technically be killing his tyres if he does go another lap. And it looks as though the tyre longevity is helping me out again, because I now have a 5.8 second lead at the front of the field. So hitting 224 as I head through the, I think that was the second chicane I went through. There are only 2 chicanes on the Mulsanne, just for reference. In terms of my prognosis at this point, I would say, and now the R92 has taken over second, so I'm going to assume that must be because the Toyota's tyres are probably baked. I might have to watch the replay later just to see what happened, but I'd assume it's because the Toyota is on worn tyres. That's what the probable cause is. But anyway, I now have a 10-second gap over the R92. The racing was pretty good to begin with, but then inevitably afterwards, the Toyota eventually dropped away from me, which meant his tyres were probably dead. And that's ultimately what allowed me to come away with what seems like a sizable advantage, and that's the grass. That to happen sooner or later. Anyways, now heading into the Ford chicanes, named of course after the Fords that won here from 66 to 69, and as I head past the Rolex time watch, well, the Rolex clock, I now begin what will be the final lap of the Gran Turismo 4 World Championship. And the R92 is now in the pits, as is the R89. I think the Toyota is also in the pits, if I recall correctly. And yet the Toyota is also in the pits. He must have been on, I think, a poor set of tyres by the time we got to the end of that previous lap. It has been pretty tricky for me to keep this car on track for most of the way, but I have at least managed to keep it on track for the majority of the race. 34.7 seconds is the gap to the Mercedes CLK GTR, who is taking a gamble by going the distance, even though I did have tyre degradation issues with the CLK before, but I'm going to assume that must not be the case here, because he must be running pretty well on that set of boots. But anyway, I am continuing to pull away from the competition behind me. And I can pretty much afford to relax now because, well, the odds of me losing the race at this point, they are almost impossible. As long as I stay on the track and don't start making a string of mistakes. But even then, that's not really a problem, so... yeah. I'm convinced in saying we have easily got this one, basically hands down. As we head through Maison Blanche, now up to the Porsche curbs again, another time. And heading through these sector splits pretty encouragingly, as I do manage to at least stay on the track long enough to keep a hold of my position. And now through the Ford chicanes now for the final time. I'm pretty much coasting my way to the win now. And there we go, 9 out of 10. And it took me an hour and 44 minutes to get those other races done. Also, furthermore, the Gile actually finished P3. But either way, we are done with the Gran Turismo World Championship, as I have made it 9 out of 10. Still, nice to see the Mercedes actually finishing P2 with the Gile in P3. I was not expecting that. But anyway, those are your point scores. Now, let's go and collect our winnings. So that was the finale of the GT World Championship. And now all we have to do is get our 250,000 credit bonus. 250k for winning the championship overall, as I now rocket up to 1.4 million. So these are your point standings. I win by 44 points over the Nissan R92 CP, then the Toyota eventually won the battle for third with the R89C, the Mercedes CLK eventually wound up finishing P4 in that race after the R92 passed him at the line. He scored 19 points, and at the back with a pretty decent 17 points was the Gile Vertigo with 17. That is all well and good. And what I am going to do now is save this replay because, well, I figured it was easier for me to wait until the last race to get some good shots of this thing. Plus, you know, it makes sense. First half being saved at the Motegi Oval, and the second half being saved at Le Mans. So upon winning the GT World Championship, we will unlock the extreme events, which will be coming later on, and we will also get the ending movie. So those are your point standings: 93, 49, 42, 40, quite a battle for third I might add, 19 and 17 are your final point scores for the GT World Championship in my playthrough. And for me, it was 9 out of 10. So let's now get a look at the car we win. And it's basically the mascot car, as we get the Spec 2 Ford GT LM race car. And upon winning all the professional events, we also unlock the ending movie, as you are about to see. Congratulations, you can now enjoy the ending movie. I think I will. However, this is going to be where this part of the video stops because I am saving the ending movie for the very end of the game. But anyway, yeah. So that's what we unlock for beating the GT World Championship. Okay, let's view the ending movie. Or I will watch the ending movie. Anyways, yeah. Back to the professional events screen, whatever. And so, there we go. The GT World Championship is now done. And before we get on with cleaning up Hong Kong, I just want to make sure the game is saved so I don't have to do the second half of that championship again. Also, something else I should mention is we have now unlocked the extreme events. However, those will not be coming until later on because I have a few more things to do first. Starting off, of course, with cleaning up this one asterisk we had in Hong Kong. Okay, let's head back over there and see if we can convert that P4 into P1. Okay, I'll be back in 20 plus minutes. So that was Hong Kong, and I gotta say, at the end of the day, it was actually a pretty intriguing race. Because, well, I basically went 16 laps on my super slicks, I then pitted in for the mediums, and I actually managed to beat the Nissan R92 CP by 4 seconds in the end. It was definitely an unpredictable one to say for sure, but at the end of the day, I came out swinging, and I won the race in the end. So basically, the recommended strategy I would use is going 16 laps on the super slicks, and if you can keep your car on the track long enough, then you should be able to maintain the lead long enough to then switch over to the racing medium tyres, which should give you more than enough grip to get to the end of the race, as you'll only have 2 laps to go after you've done 16 laps on the super slicks. And that's ironically what helped me to win at Opera Paris, as we are now 44.9% complete. I think we were on 43.4% before, so we've moved up another 1.5% is what me thinks. And we're now up to nearly 100 cars. Where is the Ford GT? Here is the Ford GT. The Spec 2 Ford GT race car. And my god, I really love this thing, because it's a Ford GT. Ironically, Kazunori Yamuchi also loves this car as much as I do, so we both have something in common. We both love the Ford GT. That's the point I'm trying to get across. But either way, there we go. We've won ourselves the mascot car of this game. Also the car that ironically appears in the intro. And I mean all 3 intros. So we've now passed 1,200 miles driven in terms of our A-spec mileage, but in terms of the miles I drove in the R89, I drove a total in the end of 373 miles. That's also if you include the cleanup race I did at Hong Kong, so I virtually drove 340 miles in this thing altogether. In terms of the championship, that's more or less what it is in terms of length, if you include the point standing queues as well. Anyway, so the GT World Championship is now done, and next time we'll be getting on with the hard rally events coming up next.